All right. So, hello and welcome to the LP Fantasy Show. I am LP, Dagan LP, and today I'm going to be talking about and kind of updating myself on the ADP shifts that have occurred in Underdog's 2022 Best Ball season. We've been drafting the Best Ball Mania 3. We've been drafting the puppy. Not a ton. We've got, I think, about maybe 8 to 10 drafts under our belt here so far. And this is something I've been doing for a little bit now, mainly here to just kind of check in with myself and talk myself through some things and talk about process, just kind of share some of the things I've been thinking about, mainly to help myself. But if you're listening and you take anything from this, great. Over the weekend, I attended a wedding. One of my best friends from third grade got married. Shout out to the Courtneys. And during that weekend, I had some time to update my draft board, change a couple of things, add a couple of things. And today I'm going to be talking about those. So first, we'll kind of go through some of the ADP shifts that I've seen, some of the movers, some of the shakers. And then I've added a new section here called the Undrafted Free Agents. Guys that I really like as my last pick in the draft that kind of get me differentiated a little bit. We want to get unique in many different ways and in unique ways. I know that sounds how you say not repetitive, but redundant. But we want to get unique in unique ways. So I'm going to talk through some of those later as well. And then I've got the NFL schedule pulled up here, kind of week 17. Sometimes it's okay to play for the last game of the year, especially because Underdog's puppy tournaments and the Best Ball Mania 3, most of their tournaments end week 17 is the finale. So let's just jump right into it here. As a warning first, I did update this ADP draft board on the 3rd. Today I'm technically recording on the 7th, and I have updated some changes up until about the 3rd round, and I'll talk about some of the, some things in the early few rounds, but I have not adjusted for most of the things after that. I really just wanted to talk about the things that I took notes on first, because I thought, I felt in this last investigation here, I guess you could call it, I found that I went a little bit more detailed than I normally do. And I've left notes on certain players, and I want to talk about those players here. Not all of them here. I think I've found some that are more important than others. First round hasn't really changed much. Najee Harris seems to be falling because I think people think he's getting fat. It's so stupid. I do want to talk about Derrick Henry here in the first round. You can now get him at the 7th pick, which means I'm okay with drafting at the 7th spot because it guarantees me like one of these 6-ish players. I'd be okay with Eckler. A lot of people, and at first I kind of agreed that like a lot of people didn't really tend to like the first round, as much as they have in years past. But I will say, like, I'm actually okay with a lot of the players in the first round. The second round is where things have slightly changed here. Aaron Jones continues to rise. We're very close to a whole round difference here. It's still probably okay, but he's no longer a money play for me. And I think that was true in my last update on May 24th. Yeah, that is true there. He was no longer a money play for me. Kamara, on the other hand, is someone who continues to fall, and I think might be someone I'm starting to get talked into. I just think about what Kamara would be if Jameis Winston was healthy, which I honestly don't expect him not to be. I do expect him to be healthy. If Michael Thomas was healthy, if there wasn't a suspension looming, what would Kamara look like? What would his ADP look like? And I think it'd be close to here. Probably not enough to go take him yet, but I can see why. I can see why Kamara might be enticing to people, especially if he continues to fall. And I think I could have got him in here, and in the 2-3 turn, I think the last time I drafted, and I passed on him for Chubb. So if he continues to fall, like, I don't know, I'm starting to get interested. Saquon's price hasn't moved too much, but I will say it has slightly moved. On the 3rd, technically, he was being drafted here as the last of these 3 running backs. But now he's evidently getting confidently taken before that, at the front of those 3. And I'm still okay with the price. Like, I don't know, maybe he's no longer a money play. I still find it hard to believe that he can't be like here when all is said and done. Not that he will be drafted there, but like he could provide that type of value. So I'm still okay with taking Saquon, and it's starting to get easier. It's starting to mean that I might just need to take him if I have an early pick in the first round with my second round pick. I'd take him ahead of Fournette. I'd take him ahead of Hill. I know that sounds crazy, but I don't know. Pittman continues to rise a little bit. Pitts is slightly falling. The biggest thing that happened in round that to me, and honestly, the entire draft board happens in round 4, and it's Sutton. Sutton has been going here late 4th, and that's even a bit higher than where he was at the beginning of Best Ball Mania 3, where he was getting drafted in the 5th round. Not only had his ADP, kind of jumped up to the 4th round, by now he's now going here where Deontay Johnson is going, which I find incredibly interesting. That's a big jump in a short amount of time. In just 4 days, Sutton going from here to here, basically almost a whole round. He's really, really jumped. And Judy has fallen a little bit here. And I guess it's simply because Judy is dealing with a hamstring issue. If that is true, if that's why people are, fading Judy here and switching over to Sutton as the number 1 guy for Russell Wilson, I think that's hilarious because it's not even it's not like he even tore his hamstring. He's just maybe dealing with a strain, or I'm saying, like, it's not like he completely ripped his hamstring in half. But it's also June. It's June. And it's not like he tore an ACL last year. So it's pretty interesting to me that flip-flop. Not only is Sutton going ahead of Judy now, but he's going way ahead, and he's going ahead of Deontay Johnson. He's going ahead of Zeke and Waller and a lot of these guys. Very, very surprising to me. I expect Deontay Johnson's ADP to continue falling. I think his has slightly. A guy, just it hasn't really slightly fallen, but I think it's going to continue to fall simply due to the contract situation. The closer we get to camp and him not being signed, et cetera, could mean a change for Pickens or Claypool's ADP, but right now hasn't moved too much. The next guy I want to talk about here, is Judy. Oh no, I've already talked about him. The next guy I want to talk about here is George Kittle. I've been saying in the last few videos, I'm waiting for Kittle's ADP to hit the 5th round, and it finally has. I think it's going to continue to go down. I'm curious as to why it has, but I think the reason I think it's going to continue to go down is kind of similar to Deontay Johnson. Just as time goes on, I think Debo is for sure going to be a part of the 49ers offense this year, and with too many mouths to feed, so to speak, I think Kittle's ADP is going to continue to fall and could get to about here. Allen Robinson, who I've been on for a very long time, his ADP is slightly rising. I'm glad we drafted, I think, enough where we did, when we did, because, I could get Saquon and Robinson at a better price than it is right now. I'm still comfortable with taking Robinson. I'm comfortable with taking him over Cooper, possibly even McLaurin, and even the Broncos wide receivers. So to me, Robinson is, if he jumps into the 4th round, he's no longer, I think, a money play, but I think he's still a guy I really, really like. Breece Hall has fallen a little bit. This area gets kind of shifted a bit. Etienne has really risen in ADP. But the guys I want to talk about in the 5th round here, the first one I want to talk about really is J.K. Dobbins. And J.K. Dobbins, to me, after initially going in about like the early 5th, maybe even late 4th, has now dropped to the late 5th round. If the consensus is worried about his ADP, his ACL, I kind of understand, although once again, it's June, and you know, he who cares if he starts camp on the pup? Like this isn't like a rookie coming in who needs to learn a new system, and missing reps is really going to do him bad. Like Dobbins is established within the Baltimore Ravens backfield, and it's not like to me that they have many other options. They've got Dobbins, they've got Gus Edwards, both of which tore their ACLs. They drafted Tyler Beatty, who's also dealing with his own injury issues right now. And Devontae Freeman's not getting drafted. And so to me, it's Dobbins and Gus Edwards that are the only two options. Yet Dobbins' ADP is falling, and Gus Edwards' ADP hasn't moved a muscle. Apologies. It's moved up one pick. It's very interesting to me that if you don't believe in Dobbins, then you should inherently believe in Gus Edwards, just even a little bit, right? And so Dobbins, I think at this price is really starting to get interesting. I think it could also have to do with maybe Lamar and his contract situation and how there hasn't been an agreement on an extension yet. His ADP is slightly falling, but if I can get the Ravens running game even cheaper than before, like that to me is that's going to really start to get interesting. Moving into the 7th or the 6th, 7th, and 8th round now, I'll talk about a couple of individual players first in this range, and then I'll talk about the quarterbacks here. Let's first talk about Schultz. Schultz to me is just weirdly insane, mainly because if you compare and contrast it with Hawkinson's ADP, Schultz's ADP, he was going in the middle of the 7th. Now he's going as the first pick in the 7th round, a borderline 6th round pick, and Hawkinson's has fallen to the end of the 7th round. It makes absolutely no sense to me, especially with Schultz's contract situation. And the more it falls, the more I'm really, really getting in on Hawkinson. AJ Dillon's ADP hasn't really fallen a lot, but slightly. But yet Jones's ADP has really risen. I get how that kind of makes sense. If we're going to believe more in Aaron Jones, should we believe Should we believe in Dillon as much as we have before? But I think that's a fallacy to do so, because I think both guys are going to be on the field at the same time. And honestly, if Dillon's ADP continues to fall, or even if it just stays where it's at, I'm okay with taking him where he's being taken. CEH is continuing to rise. I'm still okay with the price, honestly, in the 7th round, depending on what you're going to, just based on what you're getting here and buying into this offense. And like, could he be an 80% kind of player? Even if he's like a 70% kind of player, aren't you getting like a guy in an explosive offense? A lot of that stuff kind of makes sense. Game theory, though, back at the beginning of Best Ball Mania 3, CEH was going in the early 8th. He's now going in the 7th, the first half of the 7th. It's definitely a decent jump. And if it continues to rise, which I honestly could see it continue rising, maybe, it might be something where it's better to take him, or, better to take him in the puppy because of what other drafters have been getting the discount on for CEH at the beginning of the tournament. God, that was terribly said. But you get what I'm saying here. Ayuk, we don't really have to talk about a lot. I'm still in on him, even if more mouths feed. I'd like to see that ADP fall a little bit. Let's talk about these quarterbacks. And, when I first kind of went through this ADP draft board, when you're entering in the names, it's kind of easy right off the bat to see like who's falling and who had, and who's rising. And Burrow, Russ, and Stafford, while the ADPs haven't been like really, really falling, to me, based off of the ADP changes with their wide receivers, any movement backwards on these quarterbacks in terms of their ADP is money to me, and really gets me interested in taking them. Let's first start with Burrow. We don't have to talk about Chase and Higgins too long. They're guys that a lot of people believe in just based off of the capital spent on them alone. They're the only two pair of wide receivers on the same team that are going in the first 2 rounds. And, outside of Keenan and Mike Williams, and Waddle and Hill, they're going in the first. They're two wide receivers on the same team going in the first 3 rounds, and so naturally we would expect Burrow to be successful if we expect these guys to be successful. Then Boyd's ADP has slightly risen, not a lot, but just slightly. Before Boyd was going in the where did I see Boyd over here? The 10th round, kind of late 10th. Now he's going in the, like I said, not a lot, but just slightly. And yet Burrow's ADP has fallen. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's not very egregious that his ADP is falling, but he was going like here, and he's dropped like 4 or 5 spots. Like, what's up with that? The more egregious ones to me are Russ and Stafford. And let me first talk about let's first talk about Russ. Even just a couple of weeks ago, Judy and Sutton were going in the 5th round. They're now going in the 4th. Sutton has risen, his ADP by at least a round, and Judy very close to a half a round there, more than half a round. And yet Russ's ADP is falling by a pick. Only a pick, but why would Russ's ADP be falling at all? It should be going up. If Sutton and Judy's ADP is going up, Russ's ADP should be going up, just naturally. And I think it even gets more egregious with Stafford. Kupp is being taken as a 2nd player right now. Allen Robinson's ADP has slightly risen and will continue to rise, I think, into the 4th round. And then Van Jefferson has risen by a whole round, even just in a few weeks. Van Jefferson was getting taken in the 13th round. Now he's getting taken in the 12th. About 8 picks higher. And yet Stafford's ADP has fallen a few picks. That does not make sense to me. Once again, these are minor changes, but I think just logically, if these other players' ADPs, like the wide receivers, are rising, these quarterbacks' ADPs shouldn't be going backwards at all. Now, this could be error, based on the consensus, but what I actually think is going on here, and it might not even matter why, but what I think is going on here is I think drafters are becoming more patient with quarterbacks after the first few guys. Lamar's ADP is falling a little bit, but not a lot. He's still taken as like a top 5 guy. Mahomes' ADP, Allen's ADP, Herbert's ADP hasn't really shifted at all. Kyler's ADP even just slightly has gone up a little. But after that, Burrow, Russ, and Stafford are all falling. Zach Wilson's is falling. Matt Ryan's is falling. Trevor Lawrence is falling. Look at these shifts in the ADP from Zach Wilson, Matt Ryan, and Trevor Lawrence. Matt Ryan is going about a half round earlier a few weeks ago. Zach Wilson is going a round earlier a few weeks ago. And Trevor Lawrence's ADP is even falling too. Enough, in a short time span there that it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I've found that I can get Hurts later than ADP in a lot of recent drafts. Burrow later than ADP. A lot of these late round guys like Wilson and Ryan, Lawrence. Ryan's a little bit more popular, but Lawrence, Daniel Jones, Jameis Winston, a lot of guys you can get later because I think drafters just as a whole are becoming more patient after the elite options. I think they realize okay, I don't have an elite option here. Let me just wait a little bit and, I can still go get like a Stafford, and maybe Stafford produces just as well as Burrow, but for a couple of rounds later discount. So it's definitely something that's been interesting to me, something I'm going to continue to monitor, and something I might even follow here. If other drafters are becoming more patient, that allows you to become more patient. It just gives you more opportunity or more options. Sticking with the 8th round here, Russell Gage, I might be wrong on this, but he continues to rise a little bit. I think with the news that Godwin, might not come back immediately, Gage becomes a bit of a higher pick. At first, I thought I might be wrong with this, but if Godwin comes back like earlier than expected, which I've talked about Edwin Porras before, follow him on Twitter. He's talked about how Godwin might surprise people and come back quicker than people think. That Gage's ADP might just not be that great here. You might be getting a third wide receiver, a number 2 wide receiver for a few weeks, but a wide receiver 3 on the Bucks way earlier than some other wide receiver threes are going. What's interesting about Lance right now is that while ADPs have overall dropped for quarterbacks, Lance's is like one of the few that's risen. And it makes sense to me, and I think it's going to continue to rise. Similar to like the CEH thing, it's like how much does it rise until like it's no longer advantageous to take him. I tried to take him as much as I could earlier. He's no longer a money play for me. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but he is a guy I still like drafting here. Olave and Wilson in the 9th round, I expected their ADP to go up. So even a slight dip to me is just surprising, where before they were going late 8th, like about here, now they're going here for sure in the 9th round. It's weird to me for sure. Kadarius is beginning pumped up a lot as of late. Underdog just came out with a sophomore show. And he was one of the biggest, he's one of the guys they talked about, and he's definitely a big riser. He's risen by a whole round. James's Cook, his ADP has fallen a little bit, kind of makes me a little bit more into him, especially with the running backs getting taken around here. I think James Cook could really, really do well in this Bills offense. Penny, even though his hamstring or whatever the heck was bothering him is improving, his ADP is not really rising that much. Still a money play for me. I've talked about that before with the contrast of Kenneth Walker's ADP versus Rashad Penny's ADP, and the draft capital spent by the Seahawks and how awesome Penny was last year. I do think Walker could dip into that a little bit, but still, Penny to me might get more work than people think. He shouldn't be the second Seahawks running back being taken. Gronk's ADP, still like it. Justin Fields is someone who's incrementally falling, and honestly, the more he falls, the more I think I'm going to be okay with taking him. I saw an interesting take the other day on Twitter, and I wish I remembered who it was from, but they talked about how the Bears situation, while we do perceive it as bad, we perceived it as bad last year, and you could make an argument that the situation has improved for Justin Fields and for the Bears. Now, Matt Eberflus is not an offensive-minded head coach, but it's not like Matt Nagy was a good offensive-minded head coach. We were all befuddled and baffled, with some of the game planning and play calling that Matt Nagy implemented, especially with the player he had at quarterback in Justin Fields. This new coaching regime, to me, I think is going to be more likely to cater to Justin Fields' talents and get the most out of him on offense. Once again, it is the Bears offense, and so I get it. And people are afraid that Allen Robinson's no longer there, but Allen Robinson wasn't even really there last year. And the offensive line could be getting better here. They've picked up a couple of guys that fit their newer running scheme. They've also, Tevin Jenkins should be healthier off the back injury, a guy they drafted in the 2nd round last year. So, I'm actually kind of like, oh, okay, Justin Fields, and if they're going to do some rollouts and play action and deep shots, he might not be super successful, but in best ball, he's a really cheap option, and he's got, great rushing upside. And I think we saw that, at least flashes of that last year, ran a 4.4, which is pretty incredible. And so if his ADP continues to fall, I really, 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 and I'm starting to get talked into Justin Fields here. Van Jefferson's ADP, I've already talked about, has risen. I kind of understand it because to me, he is going to be the wide receiver 3 and one of the better offenses in the league. But a whole round seems quite a lot. The biggest takeaway I'm taking from Van Jefferson's ADP rising is what the hell's happening with Matthew Stafford. Oh, another reason Burrow's ADP is dropping that makes absolutely no sense to me is the fact that the Bengals offensive line got better. Bengals offensive line gets better. Tyler Boyd's ADP is rising. Chase and Higgins are taking in the top 5 picks and in the end of the second round. And yet Burrow's ADP is steadily falling. What is happening with that? It makes no sense to me. Simply because he can't run. He's a little more athletic than you think, but and I'm not expecting any rushing upside. But he could sling it all over the field, and you'd be getting great points, great value. Dotson's ADP has dropped one spot, so it hasn't really dropped a lot. It's still in the same spot, but I just have to keep talking about him because, and I've talked about him before, but first round wide receiver going in the 12th round after guys like Christian Watson and Sky Moore rounds later, is pretty phenomenal to me. I've already talked about Trevor Lawrence, his ADP falling. Weird, doesn't make sense to me. Zach Wilson's ADP is falling. The last guy I want to talk about here is Hassan Haskins. Hassan Haskins' ADP. Oh, Goff's ADP is falling. Danny Dimes' ADP is falling. Pickett's ADP is falling. All these guys' ADP is falling. So it's not just these guys that I've highlighted here that I like. Just a general overall theme and trend here. But the last guy I want to talk about here is Hassan Haskins. Sorry, I got distracted there, but I saw these names. I needed to talk about them. Hassan Haskins. This was something that I saw. I was doing this once again out of town on my laptop, and I was seeing that once again, and this is something that's been happening over a few weeks. Hassan Haskins' ADP is falling, and yet, if you look at the depth chart, I use Our Lads. If you don't know what Our Lads is, just literally type in OURLADS. They have NFL depth charts, and they tend to do a good job. They have Hassan Haskins, who the Titans spent a fourth round pick on just this draft, as the backup. They lost Deontay Foreman, who is now the backup in Carolina, and a guy I do like. And I don't think Jeremy McNichols is anything that spectacular. Maybe you go take a Jeremy McNichols at some point, but they have Hassan Haskins. OurLads.com has Hassan Haskins listed as the backup running back for the Titans. And right now, that just makes too much sense to take him as one of your later picks, especially if we're believing that Derrick Henry's not as worthy as some of these players to be taken. What's the reason that Derrick Henry's not? His age 28 season, I believe, could be close to age 29. He did just get injured last year, one of the few times that we've seen Derrick Henry get injured. So maybe it's a sign that his body is slowing down. I'm choosing to ignore most of that stuff. Even still, Hassan Haskins to me could be who I believe is a bigger back, could be a guy that could bring you value if something did happen to Derrick Henry. Same thing, I'm taking Deontay Foreman. I just think, the Carolina Panthers picked up Deontay Foreman, even though they had Chuba Hubbard. And he, to me, matches more closely with the play style of Mike McCaffrey. And Deontay could even have some value, even if he's just the RB2 on the Panthers. So those guys are interesting to me there. I guess I will talk about one more. Romeo Doubs could be more NFL ready than Christian Watson, and he's going in the last round. And Aaron Rodgers doesn't have anybody, but it's still Aaron Rodgers, and someone's got to catch passes. I'll now talk about this last section I have here, the undrafted free agents. And these are guys that are not necessarily going directly after, pick 18 or, the last pick in round 18. They're guys that just tend to have an ADP higher than 215, which I believe is, I think this is 213, 214, 2 something. But I know that Zay Jones is not going to always be the last pick in the last round, but these guys here I think are interesting to take, especially if you're trying to differentiate and become unique in a little way with your last pick. Kenny Pickett to me is one of the better ones. I think you could be getting Matt Ryan, Zach Wilson production, Daniel Jones production, Jameis Winston production. You could be getting better than those guys. Mac Jones, the Steelers offense, like, yeah, the offensive line isn't like necessarily the best, but the Steelers offense is full of talent. And I think Ben Roethlisberger truly was a black hole of talent suction that made this Pittsburgh offense worse than it is. And I think Pickett could step in and take advantage of that. So to me, Pickett is still a money play. He's completely fallen out of the top 18 rounds, and is definitely someone I'm okay with taking still at my 18th overall pick. I'll touch on a couple of guys here. Mixon, if something happened to him, I think we want our hands in either Chris Evans or Samaje Perine. I currently have Chris Evans ranked higher simply because it'll be, I think his second year. He might be more acclimated, and he's the better pass catcher, more explosive guy. Samaje is kind of more like the plotter at this point of his career. I'm interested in Brate if Gronk doesn't come back. The off chance that he doesn't. Dearness Johnson, Hunt has been talked about as a cut candidate. It's very interesting to me and very weird, as they easily have the best running back room in the NFL. But if something did happen to Hunt or Chubb, Dearness Johnson does interest me. Amari Rodgers, I like in the same vein as like Romeo Doubs. It's because like, could he come in and be, build a chemistry with Rodgers, having a whole year to have done so already? That makes some sense to me. These two guys here are going earlier than they should, Khalil Shakir and Danny Gray. But they're two guys that I really like the fit in their respective offenses. I think there's too many guys in front of Khalil Shakir. But if something happens, maybe maybe Khalil Shakir steps in and finds some success. Danny Gray is someone who I really, really like, especially in, best ball, because I think he can be, I don't know why I did air quotes over best ball. I more mean he could be better in best ball because of his skill set. He's based off of the skill set that I've read about. It almost reminds me of like Tyler Lockett. Smaller guy, but really good on deep balls. I'm not saying he has the body control of Tyler Lockett. I'm not saying that. But, if Lance is slinging it around and chucking it, and really increasing the 49ers average depth of target, I think Danny Gray could really benefit from that. Once again, these are like wide receiver 4s on their teams, maybe even a wide receiver 5, but just some guys that I kind of like. Rookies. Ricky Seals-Jones. This is an interesting one to me, but had some success last year once Logan Thomas went down. And, I do somewhat believe in this Giants offense, and Ricky Seals-Jones is like the only tight end there. And to me could, play a Dawson Knox kind of role. I just think, if you're going for like a late round tight end, Ricky Seals-Jones is not the worst thing in the world. Same thing with Jonnu Smith. There's reports that he's coming back healthier into this offseason and approaching things differently. Any positive sign of change would be good for Jonnu Smith, because last year I think I was big on Jonnu Smith. And the reason I was is because I believe in his versatility and how well that can work in a Patriots offense. Granted, this is no longer Josh McDaniels calling the offense, but it is interesting to me. I've seen some hope for Will Fuller getting signed by the Browns. I don't think it's happening, and the reason is because they have Will Fuller already in Anthony Schwartz. Year 2 in this offense, if Deshaun Watson plays, could be Will Fuller. The next few names here, Matt Corral, Ritter, Baker. These are 3 guys that I'm kind of okay with because I think they're going to play and start. Corral, I think, it's please no Darnold. Ritter, could beat out Mariota. Baker, let's say an injury happens, all of a sudden Baker's the hottest commodity there is. Or with the 24th person coming out against Deshaun Watson and suing him, or filing claims against him, or however you phrase it, Baker could be the quarterback of the Browns. Probably not happening for the Browns, but, there's some upside there. Same thing with Willis. I don't know, rushing upside. Let's just throw something out there. Could happen. Same thing with Garoppolo. Kind of in on Troutman a little bit. Nothing crazy. What if something happens to Najee Harris? Like, is Snell the guy? Why isn't Benjamin getting drafted more? I think if Connor were to go down, it's not like I think Keontae Ingram would just all of a sudden take over the 3-round role duties. Benjamin, I think, would take over for the passing down work. Maybe that's not something we want in the Cardinals offense. If something happens to, if Deshaun Watson doesn't play, hello, Jacoby Brissett. If something happens to Wentz, what about Sam Howell or Taylor Heineke? Not really something I'm that thrilled about. Huntley played well last year and got you points, especially with his legs. If Lamar doesn't even play, hello, Tyler Huntley. Scotty Miller is a guy I'm kind of in on. Maybe you like Gage. Well, what about Scotty Miller, a guy that has rapport with Brady already? And, maybe he's the wide receiver 3 in this offense, an explosive wide receiver 3, a deep threat, and yet he's not even getting drafted. We're really starting to get into the weeds here. But Tyrod Taylor, if Danny Dimes' ADP is falling, and it's because, I think some people are not believing in Danny Dimes, I get it. Why isn't Tyrod Taylor, even being considered to be drafted? I think backup quarterbacks are a kind of interesting way to get unique here, because a lot of people are really, really being patient, which I get. I totally understand. But Tyrod is familiar with the system, played in Buffalo under Dable, backing up Josh Allen. When he was on the field last year for the Texans, he was kind of interesting before tearing a hamstring. And, now he gets to go into an offense that has a better offensive line, has Saquon, has Kenny G, has Kadarius Toney, has Ricky Seals-Jones, has Brian Dable as an offensive coordinator. I don't know, isn't this kind of an interesting pick here? Last but not least, I'll talk about one more wide receiver, and his name is Kyle Phillips. Kyle Phillips is not really a big name, and I doubt anybody's really drafting him. But he plays for the Titans. Robert Woods coming back from the ACL, I think, is going to take longer than people think. This is a guy who tore his ACL in the middle of the year. And, what if Treylon Burks isn't as ready as we think? I think Kyle Phillips could step in. I'm not saying he is Cooper Kupp, but he has that kind of archetype where he's not blazingly fast, but he's quick, good out of the slot, good, route runner. There's something interesting to me about Kyle Phillips. Once again, these undrafted free agent guys, these are guys we can take that we can confidently take with our last pick, whether it's, the last pick in the 18th round here, or it's, one of these picks. You're telling me you're really that much confident that Byron Pringle or Brian Edwards or Paris Campbell are going to, or Brevin Jordan are really going to do something where you can get some of these other guys here and actually obtain some value with your last overall pick. I've now talked for a while, and I have one more thing I want to talk about here, but that is it for our ADP draft board. I will continue to update this, and I'll probably update it tomorrow, making sure I'm the most up-to-date as possible. I know it's only been a few days, but considering, things are changing and happening, more news comes out, more ADPs are going to shift. I think if I do this every week, I'm not going to be, doing this every week, I think might get a little bit much, but every couple of weeks, I think will be good. But considering I've already adjusted for the 7th, I might go in and adjust. The last thing I want to focus on here is the NFL schedule, and this is simply from week 18. Oh, dang it. I was supposed to look at week 17. Week 17 here. And the reason we're looking at the schedule here is not because we want to make all of our decisions based off of what the NFL schedule is like, but let's say you're in the finals. Let's say you draft a team, using, the ADP, you draft a really good team and you're in the finals. You're in the finals with, however many teams are left in let's say Best Ball Mania 3 or the Puppy. the final is week 17. Let's see. You'd be going up against, I don't remember how many you're going up against in the final week 17 in either the Puppy or the Best Ball Mania 3, but you want a chance at winning the final. And the way we kind of do that is we kind of influx some DFS kind of knowledge and process into that. And we go after games that we expect to be high scoring. A lot can happen from now until until week 17, injuries and all that stuff, which I get. But I think if we believe that some of these teams will be somewhat healthy, and even if there were injuries, you'd have to have really big injuries to like quarterbacks and stuff like that for these game totals to really fall. And maybe we're wrong about certain defenses and stuff like that, but I think there's a few games I want to highlight here that could actually be pretty interesting in terms of really high scoring. The first one I'll talk about is Denver and Kansas City. Kansas City doesn't have Tyreek Hill anymore, but like you're buying into like Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes versus each other, right? And if you can opposite stack those, I think that's very interesting. Do you want to go Mahomes and Russ in the 4th and the 7th round? I think that's a little bit egregious. But if you can get Russ and pair him, with like Judy or Sutton, and then get Kelsey on the flip around, or even CEH, or go after one of the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers, or get Sutton and Judy and Russ and get Kelsey, I think there's a lot of potential there for points. Another one I'll talk about is, and this one's almost impossible, but Monday night, week 17, you got Buffalo at Cincinnati. Two very, to me, high-powered offenses. Being able to get a stack that includes these players is kind of difficult. You're obviously not getting like Chase and Diggs. You could get Diggs and Higgins though, and you could come back in these later rounds and go get a guy like Jamison Crowder, who's going in like the 12th round. You could go and get Burrow, who's been falling. A 3rd and a 6th, once again, for a stack like that just seems, to stack the quarterbacks like that just seems egregious. And honestly, I don't think you need to do it. You just have to hope that the players hit the wide receivers hit right, and maybe you throw in like a running back stack in there or something like that. But with Burrow's ADP falling, stack, and if you miss out on Chase, go get Diggs and then go get Higgins, get Burrow and then get Crowder, and do something, go get some of these players from this game. Another one here, and it just seems obvious to me, is Los Angeles at Los Angeles. Yes, two what we expect to be very good defenses, but also two what we expect to be high-powered offenses. The Chargers are all in this year, especially in surrounding Justin Herbert with talent, with protection, with players on the defensive side of the ball, and the Rams upgraded Odell to Allen Robinson. So I think there are definitely some interesting players to be had there in that Los Angeles game. Another one I guess I could see is like San Fran and Las Vegas. San Fran does like to ball control. Taking Zach Wilson doesn't scare me as much now with, the fact that they're playing Seattle. It's at Seattle. You don't love that. But, that offense to me should just be way better than what that defense is like. The last one I'll kind of talk about here is New Orleans and Philly. A sneaky one to me. This is one where, like, in week 17, could the Saints be fully healthy with Jameis and Michael Thomas and Kamara and all that stuff? Yeah. And Philly, who I see as, winning the NFC East, getting AJ Brown, I think, is no small addition. I just see that there could be some points had there. I'm not sure I see much else. Arizona and Atlanta seems kind of interesting. But what I think we want to do here is, I think we want to kind of combine the idea of, okay, let's get like a nice week 17 stack, but let's also go get some good players on some good teams. Buffalo and Cincinnati are those two to me. Los Angeles and Los Angeles are two to me. Even New Orleans and Philly to me. And who did I talk about earlier? Denver and Kansas City. So with that, I will stop talking. I think I've talked for a while. I had to re-record this one. Sometimes spiders just want to interrupt you from podcasting. If you have listened thus far, all the way up until this point, thank you for listening. Once again, it's not why I do it, but I do appreciate it. Thank you to me for picking recording back up, even after a short hiatus. I'll record again on Thursday. Not sure what I'll record. Maybe I'll go over the draft because I also drafted while on the plane in another team for the puppy tournament. I'll probably go over that, and maybe we'll even draft again. With these ADPs shifting, especially with some of my money players shifting in directions that I don't like. It might be time to fit in a couple more drafts and also reassess the ADP draft board. This has been the LP Fantasy Show. I am LP, and I will see you, or you will hear me, on Thursday. Thanks for listening.